back here looking at the guitars in Shelly Lee Alley Jr. So just a little story, if you could go back to Jimmy Rogers back when they were doing the recording in 1991. What stories did you have about Will Rogers? Because that was mentioned a few times.
Yeah, Daddy never mentioned Will Rogers. I mean, he knew who he was and all. He never brought it up. But my uncle, Alvin, who was on that session, told me that when they got to San Antonio, that Jimmy Rogers wanted Daddy and I, he and Daddy to come up to his hotel room. And he said they got on the elevator, and there was a guy in the back of the elevator. They didn't pay attention to him. Kind of had his head down, and they go up the elevator, and they get off of Jimmy's floor, and they walk down the floor and knock on the Jimmy's door, hotel room door. And this guy was standing behind them. They had to pay attention to him. And Jimmy opened the door and he said, "Hey boys, good to see you. Turn around and say hi to Will Rogers." So I never put a lot of credence into that. My uncle said that. I didn't doubt it, but I began to compare dates. So when they recorded Traveling Blues, that was January 31st, 1931 at the Texas Hotel. Well, Jimmy picked him up to go to the recording session. He wouldn't have picked him up that same day. We knew he was coming back from Fort Worth. So my dad and his brother were already in San Antonio at the same time that Will Rogers landed at the San Antonio airport. And there's a film out there that looks like Jimmy Rogers is standing close to the airplane after they landed, because we know he was there. Now, Jimmy during that time lived in Kerrville, but he kept a room in the Gunter Hotel. So we don't know. I always assumed that my dad and his brother Alvin stayed at the Texas Hotel. The reason they recorded Texas Hotel, Ralph Peer, who had a portable recording thing, set it up in a room in the Texas Hotel. So whether my dad and uncle stayed in the Texas Hotel or the Gunter Hotel, I don't know. But we know Jimmy stayed there. He kept a room there. So it's feasible that the date-wise, what my uncle said could have happened. It's not unusual. My daddy was not a name dropper. So a lot of things happened with him in music, and he didn't think a whole lot about the individual because he was always thinking about music. So that well could have happened. Be interesting if it did. There'd be no way to prove that it did happen or that it didn't happen, but I know the dates line up.
Now we know at that time there's a lot of newspaper articles too that back it up that Will was traveling the country, and especially Texas. And when he was in Texas, that Jimmy Rogers was doing some touring with him and meeting up at certain places throughout in that month, and actually a couple of months. And but it was to help, I guess, raise money. Was it for the Depression time?
Era,
yeah. So he was, both of them would have been very well known at that time.
Absolutely.
And it's based on, just like I said, a lot of newspaper articles that they were in San Antonio around that same time frame. So that wouldn't surprise.
And another reason my dad
pictures.
Wouldn't have said much about Will Rogers is because Daddy always gravitated toward musicians and singers. Will was neither. Now, he was an entertainer. He was very famous, but Daddy never mentioned him, but my uncle did. So could it have happened? The answer is it could have. Have no proof that it did or didn't, but time-wise, it could have. So I thought it was an interesting story.
So your dad, how did he met your mom, and through her got to know Jesus? How did he come to know Jesus?
People talk about a come to Jesus moment. The way I understand it, in Beaumont, it's been 1945, shortly after I was born. My dad had his band. Clyde hadn't married yet, so he was living at Tour Escort, sharing a room with Shane Kennedy, the bass player in the band. They'd played somewhere the night before, out of town, And everybody in the band, my daddy included, all of them would get drunk, except for Clyde. Now, Clyde is like 14, 15 years old, taking care of the grown men. Well, anyway, they stayed out all night, and they didn't come home till the next morning. And Clyde said when they walked past the little cabin where Mama and Daddy and I were staying, Mama was standing out on the front porch. And Clyde said he thought, oh, this isn't good. He just walked right past there and went down their place. Well, apparently, we don't know. I never asked. But apparently, my mom had a real come to meeting, Jesus meeting with my dad about that. But shortly thereafter, and I don't know how long after that, my dad received Jesus Christ. You want me to tell that story? You got time for it?
Yeah.
This is what my mother told me. So not long after that, my mom was always telling my daddy that you need Jesus. You need Jesus. And he just couldn't believe it could be that simple. The problems he'd had in life, drinking, you just need Jesus. And so we had a little, where we lived, the living room, the bedroom is all the same, as I was told. And right above our bed was a picture of Jesus. So my daddy come in early one morning, and all night long he was under conviction that you need Jesus, you need Jesus. And he walked in, opened the door. This is what my mom said, my dad said. He opened the door. I woke up and I sat up in bed, glad to see my daddy. And I pointed the picture and I said, Daddy, Jesus. And my mom said, my dad said that was like a dagger in his heart. And shortly thereafter, he gave his life to Jesus. He quit drinking. He never drank again. It just totally turned his life around.
We'll end on that note.
Okay.
Good note to end on.
Good note.